The sun was still crawling along the horizon when Benedito Ramalho opened his eyes. That Tuesday morning, 62 years weighing on his back, hands as thick as umbarana roots, and a heart that had stopped dreaming a long time ago. Benedito was the owner of Fazenda Boa Esperanca, a piece of dry, stubborn land that insisted on giving life even when the sky forgot to send rain. He raised goats, chickens, and planted corn and beans. But what he loved most and no one understood was a donkey named Capito. Capito was 20 years old. He was old, gray, with one ear drooping to the left side, and a gaze so deep it seemed to hold the secrets of the world. Benedito had received that animal from his late father, and since then, the two had been inseparable. In the morning, Capito waited at the door. In the afternoon, they walked together to the dam. At night, Benedito always left a handful of rapadura near the corral. People in the region laughed. Benedito is going crazy. He likes that donkey more than people. And Benedito would reply, seriously, people have disappointed me a lot. Capitan, never. But Benedito's life had not always been like this, closed off, distrustful, hardened like dry clay. There was a story behind that silence. 30 years earlier, Benedito was a 32-year-old young man, strong, cheerful, with a smile that lit up any backyard. At that time, Fazenda Boa Esperanca was prosperous, full of workers, animals, and abundance. His father, Mr. Estavo, was a fair and respected man, not feared for violence, but for his character. It was at an animal fair, in a dusty little town 3 leagues from the farm, that Benedito saw Maristela. For the first time, she was selling cheese at a faded yellow stall. She had dark hair, tied in a simple braid, honey-colored eyes, and a way of smiling that disarmed even the bravest man's heart on the spot. But there was a problem. Maristela was the daughter of Colonel Aristarco, the most powerful and proudest man in the region. And Colonel Aristarco had sworn publicly that his daughter would only marry someone of her level. Someone rich, someone from a family with a name, not the son of a simple farmer, no matter how hard-working he was. The love between Benedito and Maristela began as all forbidden things, in silence, in glances, in words exchanged in hiding, in letters folded inside shirt pockets. Capitu, who at that time was still young, with shiny brown fur, was the messenger of that love. Benedito would tie letters around the donkey's neck and release the animal toward the fence that divided the two families' lands. Maristela would come to get them. She would read them crying. She would reply. She would tie the answer around Capitu's neck, and the donkey would return. He always returned, as if he knew the weight of what he carried. Benedito, does your father know? Ramandinho, the farm foreman, a short man with a broom-like mustache and the loyalty of a faithful dog, once asked. He doesn't, Ramendo. And for now, he can't know. But young man, Colonel Aristarco is not a man to be trifled with. I know, but the heart doesn't ask for permission. Raimondo, the heart simply goes. Ramondinho scratched his head, shook his leather hat, and murmured quietly, God forbid, this boy is going to get himself into a hell of a mess. And he was right. 3 months later, Colonel Aristarco discovered the letters. On a hot, windy afternoon, he appeared at Fazenda Boa Esperanca, on horseback, with 2 henchmen behind him, and called Mr. Estivo to the front door. The conversation was short. The words were as hard as stone, and the conclusion was clear. If your son approaches my daughter again, I will ruin this farm. I have the power to do it, and you know it. Mr. Estivo called Benedito. He closed the door, and he said, with the saddest voice his son had ever heard, My son, there is love that life does not allow to live. Benedito cried that night, alone, in the corral, hugging Capitu's neck, and the donkey stayed quiet, as if he understood. The years passed like dust carried by the Sertao wind. Benedito stayed. He worked. He buried his father. He inherited the farm. He never married. He never sent any more letters. He never went back to the fair in that little town, and she was married off to a merchant from another region, a man chosen by Colonel Aristarco, a man of money, a man of position, and so life went on, or pretended to. Colonel Aristarco died years later of a heart attack, sitting on the veranda of his own mansion. It was a lavish wake, with many people crying fake tears. Maristela was widowed a few years later. When the merchant died in an accident on a dirt road in the early hours of a winter morning, she was left alone, childless, without fortune because her husband had left debts, and she returned to the only thing that was still hers, a small farm that remained from her father, Isay Neditans, bordering the back of Fazenda Boa Esperanca, bordering Benedito's farm. The first time he saw her after 30 years was on a Monday morning. Benedito was fixing a fence when he heard the noise of an old car stopping on the dirt road. He looked up, and his heart that had dried up like a river in drought, gave such a strong jolt that he had to hold on to the wooden post to keep from falling. It was her. Older. White hair, but with the same honey-colored eyes, with the same way of tilting her head to the side when she was thoughtful. Maristela got out of the car slowly, looked around, saw Benedito, and stopped. Silence. 30 years of silence fit into that second. Benedito, she said, in the voice of someone carrying an enormous weight. Maristela, he replied, in the voice of someone who had never forgotten. And it was then that old Capitu, pot-bellied, with a drooping ear, trotted slowly along the fence, reached the wire, pushed his muzzle between the posts, and snorted, as if he recognized someone who had come to stay. Maristela laughed. It was a wet laugh, full of tears. This is an Capita. Benedito swallowed hard. It is 20 years old, stubborn just like me. The days that followed were strange and beautiful. Maristela needed help to get her small farm in order. The house was abandoned, the roof leaking, the field overgrown with weeds, and Benedito, without saying anything, without making any speeches, simply sent old Ramandino, still with his broom-like mustacha, along with 2 boys from the farm to help. "Boss, are you sure?" Ramandino asked, blinking with mischief. "Just go, Ramando, and stop looking at me like that." "Like what, boss?" With that smile of someone who knows everything. "But I do know everything, boss. Primera, olwa, is, have." And he gave a hearty laugh that echoed across the yard. The people in the region started talking, as people always do. Tongues were loosened. Comments were bitter. Some found it funny. Others turned up their noses. 2 old people. What kind of story is this? But there was one woman in the region who was not laughing. Donaria, Maristela, cousin, who had been waiting for the small farm's inheritance to fall into her lap when Colonel Aristarco died, and who had been left empty-handed when the will was revealed, was furious. Donaria was a woman with a sharp tongue and a narrow heart. When she saw that Maristela had returned and that Benedito was helping, she began working against the 2 of them. She spread rumors, she said. Maristela had only come back for Benedito, ese posesiones. She said Benedito was senile. She said it was all a shame, 2 old people meeting like that, as if they were young. And the words reached them. They y always do. One afternoon, Mr. Genuino, an old neighbor of Benedito, a respected man and godfather to many in the region, went to the farm with hat in hand, with the manner of someone about to say something difficult. "Benedito, my son, people are talking a lot. I came here because I am your true friend. They say this woman will harm you, that she only wants what is yours." Benedito remained quiet for a long moment. He looked at the horizon. He looked at Capitu, who was calmly chewing grass. Then he replied, slowly, "Mr. Genuino, do you know how many years I spent alone on this farm?" "I do," Son, I do. Do you know how many nights I looked at the ceiling and thought I had let the best part of my life pass by out of fear of facing what was difficult? The old man lowered his head. I know, Benedito. Then forgive me. But this time, I'm not going to let it go. But life, as always, does not give things for free. On a cold winter morning in the Surtao, when the dew was still on the leaves, Benedito went to the corral too early. He felt something was wrong. That intuition that animal keepers develop over time found Capita lying on the ground. The donkey did not get up. The veterinarian was called. Hasoldas Capitaun. The animal had reached his limit. Failing heart, swollen legs, short breath. He suffered a lot to get here, the veterinarian said honestly. It's a matter of time, Benedito. Benedito sat on the ground in the corral beside Capita and stayed there. Maristela arrived when she heard the news. She sat on the other side of the animal, and the two old people who had lost 30 years stayed there, one on each side of the donkey, in silence, while the sun rose slowly. It was Capetu who had brought them together again. And would Capetu be the one to separate them? Capetu lay down for 3 days. During those 3 days, Maristela did not return to the small farm. She stayed at the main farm. She cooked. She cared for him. Benedito would not stay away from the corral for long. He always came back, checked the animal's breathing, adjusted the water trough. Ramandino, who had seen a lot in life, stood at the kitchen threshold, drinking coffee, pretending his eyes were not misty. This donkey raised this man more than any person ever did, he said quietly, to no one in particular. On the 4th day, to the veterinarian's astonishment, Capitan got up slowly, with difficulty, with that dignity that only old animals possess, the dignity of someone who has seen a lot and still chooses to stand. Benedito was in the yard when he heard the noise. He ran, and he found Capitu standing, looking at him with that deep gaze. As always, Benedito hugged the donkey's neck and cried. He cried as he had not cried since the night his father said there is love that life does not allow to live. But this time, the tears had a different taste. It was that afternoon that Benedito made the bravest decision of his life. He called Maristela to sit on the veranda. The sunset was the color of orange and wine. Capitu was in the pasture, eating slowly, as if he knew he could rest now. Maristela, I have something to tell you. I should have said it 30 years ago, but I was a coward. I was obedient when I should have been brave, and I lost the best time of my life in silence. She remained still, looking at him. I don't want to be a coward again. I'm old. You're old. But the heart, that rascal, hasn't aged. And I want to know if you'll give me a chance to be what I should have been back then. Not for soap opera romance. No. But because you are the only person who understood from the beginning that an old donkey can be sacred. Maristela was so quiet that Benedito began to regret it. Then she said, Benedito, I kept every letter you sent me. 30 years inside a little wooden box. I moved house 3 times and the box was always in my carry-on bag, never in the moving truck. Do you know why? He shook his head. Because it was the only thing I knew, with absolute certainty, was mine. That was true. That no one had given me out of obligation or interest. Their union was not grand. There was no party. There was no luxury. On a late afternoon with the smell of wet earth because it had rained that week. A good rain. The kind the earth embraces with gratitude. Benedito and Maristela in front of Ramandino as witnessed. Mr. Genuino as friend. And as Capitu renewed out loud what had always existed between them. No paper, no ceremony, just words spoken with the seriousness of those who no longer have time to waste. I'm staying, she said. Ramandino took off his hat, blew his nose loudly, and declared, Thank God. I've been waiting for this since I had hair. Everyone laughed. Even Capitu seemed to give a satisfied kick in the air. Donaria tried one more time. She showed up at the farm with old documents, claiming rights over part of Maristella's small farm in a last attempt to destroy what was being built. Benedito received her at the door. Come. Without shouting, without threatening, Mrs. Donaria, you can file a lawsuit, you can talk to a lawyer, you can shout to the four winds, whatever you want. Bats notice. This woman spent 30 years suffering because of people who thought they could decide what was right for other people's lives. This time, it won't be like that. You can go. Donaria left, and she did not return. Capito died on a waning moon morning. 4 months later, he died sleeping in the corner of the corral that had been his since forever. With a handful of rapadura beside him, Benedito had placed it there before bed, as he always did. Benedito and Maristella buried him together in the shade of a white urema tree, in the corner of the farm where the sun shone beautifully on winter afternoons. Benedito planted a simple wooden cross and stood in silence for a long time. Then he said, in a low voice, "Thank you, Capito. You were more faithful than many people. You carried love letters when I didn't have the courage to deliver them. You stayed by my side when I didn't deserve company, and you gave me enough time to fix what I had broken." Maristella took his hand, and the two stood there, holding hands, looking at the simple wooden cross, while the Sertao wind passed slowly through the urema leaves. Fazenda Boa, Esperanza, had never seemed so alive. Maristella brought flowers to the veranda. She brought the smell of good food in the morning. She brought laughter to the corridors that had known only silence for decades. Ramundinho became 5 years younger. I swear, the broom-like mustache looked more satisfied. Mr. Genuino came for coffee every week and always left repeating, "It's never too late. It's never too late." And the farm, the dry, stubborn land that insisted on giving life, bloomed as if it knew the time had come. How many times in your life have you let fear speak louder than love? How many times have you obeyed when you should have dared? How much time have you lost waiting for the right moment, the perfect situation, the approval of someone who doesn't even truly love you? Benedito lost 30 years. 30 years of silence, of solitude, of a stopped heart knot because it didn't love, but because it was afraid to face what was difficult. And in the end, who kept that love? Who was faithful when everything seemed forgotten? An old donkey with a drooping ear. Fidelity does not live only in people. It lives in everything you care for with affection, in the animal you treat well, in the land you respect, in the memory you preserve. The forbidden love of Benedito and Maristella was not forbidden by life, it was forbidden by fear, by pride, by the judgment of those who had nothing to do with it. Today, I ask you, is there any love in your life that you are letting die out of fear? Is there someone you love but haven't had the courage to tell? Is there a dream you buried because someone said it wasn't the right time? Life does not give back time, but it sometimes gives a second chance. And when it does, don't let it pass, because in the end, what will remain is not the big house, not the land, not the money. What will remain is whether you are faithful to what your heart always knew was true. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is going even with fear. It is speaking even while trembling. It is loving even while risking. Subscribe to the channel. If this story touched your heart, leave your comment below. Write the name of your city and what you felt when you heard this story. Tell us, have you ever had a love that stayed kept in silence? Were you brave in time? Subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell every week. A new story that stirs the soul, that makes you cry, think, and start over. Share with that person who needs courage today. It could be the most beautiful gift you pay. Iberjiben.